It's an interesting time to be looking to buy a new car because a lot has changed in the last few years and a lot is changing ahead of us. So in this video, we're really going to do our best to break it down and to figure out what is the best option for you. We're going to be talking about hybrids, plug-in hybrids, electric, petrol, diesel. What is the best option? Because at the end of the day, things are changing massively. At the time of filming this, petrol cars have about a 32% market share, diesel 22%. So that's about 50% of cars are good old-fashioned combustion engines. But what about the other 50%? Electric, plug-in hybrid, standalone hybrid. In fact, things are changing dramatically. Over 60% of new cars sold are now automatic. And grey, that's the most popular colour choice. Our stand-in actor today is the Kia Sportage. This is the 30th anniversary. Believe it or not, this has been around 30 years, 5 generations, 7 million of these sold worldwide. Now, this is a plug-in hybrid. So the petrol engine, which is a 1.6 litre, combined with an electric motor that's here on the rear wheels, means that it's 4-wheel drive and it's got about 265 brake horsepower. Now, in this video, I'm going to take all discretion out of it. I'm going to speak purely logically of your situation versus what car makes most sense. And remember, the most sense doesn't always mean it's the best option. As personally, I adore petrol cars, and realistically, I probably should have a diesel or an EV. So using logic and logic alone, we're going to break this into 2 categories. The category of being able to charge at home and the category of not being able to charge at home. Beginning with the first. So if you live in a house with off-street parking and you have the ability to install a home charger or at least use a 3-pin socket, and let's say in that scenario that most of your driving is around town, you don't really go very far, then something like a plug-in hybrid like this Kia Sportage makes a lot of sense. And the reason being is because you can use electric power alone. You can charge it up very cheaply at the night rate at home. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. And then you can potter around town in electric mode alone, and then you can just click the hybrid button here and off you go into the distance with your petrol engine. Very, very handy. However, if you do a lot of driving, but you also live in this same house, then maybe a fully electric car is the option. Something with a big battery, maybe a Tesla Model 3 long range, or depending on your budget, if you can afford a Mercedes-Benz EQS, those have over 600 kilometer range. Something like that then makes a lot of sense. Now, in this scenario, you could also buy a diesel and that would also make a lot of sense. But if you have the ability to charge at home, certain providers offer free electricity on one day of the weekend, or you can use the night rate, and that all of a sudden becomes a very attractive option. Now, if you live somewhere where you can't charge at home and you don't have the option to plug it in at night and avail of those night rates, then really anything that needs a plug is kind of out of bounds, because you're talking 4, 5, 6 times the price to use the public infrastructure. So then let's break it into our 2 segments. If you drive around town, then you're really left with 2 options. One is a tiny petrol engine, usually comes in a small car like a Volkswagen Up, or you could go for a standalone hybrid. You see the likes of taxi drivers driving Toyota Priuses, and that's because they're very efficient around town. And if you live in that same scenario, however, you do a lot of mileage for work or for pleasure or for whatever might be the reason, then it's tough to beat a good old-fashioned diesel that'll get between 50 and 60 miles per gallon. Now, to talk about each category of powertrain individually, and we'll start with the good old-fashioned diesels. Now, diesels are great for people doing a lot of driving. Also, so many people love to get in their car and see over 1,000 kilometers range, and something like an Audi A6, that is fully achievable. On top of that, diesels are brilliant for towing, and if you're doing a lot of business miles, you can actually claim the VAT back on diesel, which is brilliant, and you cannot do that on petrol. Next up, petrol. Now, it is no secret that petrols are the best cars and the most enjoyable cars to drive. And I know someone's going to go, oh yes, my Tesla now, it's a lot quicker now to 60. I know it is, but a microwave is faster to cook a steak, but I still prefer to use a frying pan or a barbecue. It's all about experience, and petrol cars with intake noises, exhaust, turbo flutter, all of that is just hard to beat. plug-in hybrids, we're sitting in one, and as we mentioned earlier, they can be great for the little commute around town, and then you can also go far down the country should you please. Another thing to note about them is that I think the average daily commute is about 28.5 kilometers, so you could do pretty much all that on electric power alone. But what I didn't mention earlier is that plug-in hybrids can be a lot of fun because they're able to pair a petrol engine or even a diesel engine in some very rare scenarios with an electric motor, meaning generally you can get a little bit of four-wheel drive, but also you can actually have a lot more power. This is a family mid-sized SUV and it's got 265 brake horsepower. That is more than a Golf GTI. I know it's heavier, but just for context, there can be a lot of fun and a lot of power out of plug-in hybrids. Hybrids, technically standalone hybrids that don't need to be plugged in. As we said earlier, brilliant for people who live somewhere where they can't charge, and they're great around town. They don't tend to have any massive, huge advantage in terms of performance or anything like that. They're just good, reliable around town cars. And last but not least, electrics. Now this is a super controversial powertrain. Lots of people adore them and think they're the best things since sliced bread, and other people literally think they're going to end the world. And the reality is I sit somewhere in the middle. I see the pros, I see the cons. They are fantastic if you can avail of home charging. As I said earlier in the video, some electricity providers offer free charges on a Sunday, and if you've got a car that has maybe a 500 or 600 kilometer range, which I know there's not very many of, but that's your whole week of driving and you can be doing it free. You can also use things like vehicle to load, and you can actually store electricity in your car and then you can cycle it back into the house. I've heard mad stories of people using solar power, storing it there, sending it back into their house at night time. It's phenomenal and you can do a lot of that. But as a car to drive, they're generally really sophisticated, very, very smooth. They have a lot of tech and they're quite often very quick to accelerate, which can be a really nice party piece. I would say the one drawback again is the depreciation, or the unknown depreciation. They haven't been around as long. Something like a Tesla Model S, which is one of the first kind of mainstream electric cars that we saw in Ireland, have only been here 10 years. It's hard to know where they'll end up. I know a lot of people worry about warranty, but remember most of them have 6, 7, 8 year battery warranties, so you should be covered. And you can always get a printout from a dealership of what your battery status is. So EVs, dividing opinions, that's up to you, but if your scenario is where you drive a lot, you have the ability to charge at home, then it is a great option and certainly worth exploring. Well, there you go. Hopefully this video has helped educate you a little bit more and figure out where you stand in terms of what powertrain to buy in 2024. And if you do have any specific questions, then feel free to reach out on any of our socials or to leave a comment below. But for now, that's it from us. We'll see you in the next one.